Hello, everyone, and welcome to my coverage of my Anti-Chess World Championship games continued. We are currently on match three, um, and yeah, so in this game I was playing against Lowall, and at this point in the tournament, there have been two games played, and Lowall and I were the only two people who had not lost a single game, let alone a match. So this was definitely going to be a tough match, and so problem for this match for me was I didn't prepare whatsoever. I did not have a clue of of who Lowell who Lowell actually is because Lowell didn't have very many games on their account, and all the games were from previous years, and so I didn't really know who I was going up against, and because they didn't play top tier opponents in their first two rounds, I didn't really know what to study or where to go from there. So this was just sort of, I was hoping that I could maybe test out in the first couple of games to see what they were playing, and maybe by the end I would be able to catch up. But anyways, we're starting off. I have the white pieces in the first game, and I definitely open with e3. I should also mention a shout out again to Kex for making these studies. It's really amazing, and shout out to Lawal for playing this game. Lawal responds with the modern defense e6, and at this point in time, I was eager to go for bishop a6. Um, Probably a stronger move is let me go back a second. Probably a stronger move would be uh, probably b4, and after the bishop takes, you have lots of options for your bishop. Um, and Further to that, the strongest move is probably actually queen g4. Then after takes, you recapture with the bishop, and you have two bishops aiming down on these areas. So if black doesn't make the right move, then you got trouble for black over here and trouble for black over here because white can capture so many different ways. But anyways, in this game, I went for bishop a6, and okay, knight captures. I play b4, and after the bishop captures, I go for queen e2. Is known as the stockfish defense. The bishop takes on d2, and I immediately take back. Um, in this position, I'm pretty sure there's only one okay move, and that's to recapture the queen. I recapture with the knight. C5 is then immediately played, and I bring my knight back to f1, just doubling my knights right here. Nice and happy. The other threat is if this file ends up ever getting opened up, I can maybe play knight h2 if the rook becomes open here. But we have a5, and I play h4, opening up that file immediately. And after queen takes, rook takes, it was obvious that Lowell had done some studying and went for bishop to b7. So now after I take, uh, Lowell takes here, and obviously I have to take again because I cannot recapture. And what this sort of does is eventually Lowell is going to have to capture this, so I will have no way of continuing to get the rook to come down to this file and then trap it with knight h2. So I capture the g-pawn, Lowell captures, and then I capture the knight down here, and after rook captures, king captures, rook captures, king captures. It's a fairly even game, but the reason one advantage for both sides in this situation is uh, white has a bishop to black's pawns. However, this bishop isn't could be a good thing if I can get it out, but if I can't, then it could become a problem because these pawns are very advanced. They can put pressure. Black has lots of space on the queen side, and other than that, the position's just solid. There's no huge weaknesses. So Lowell immediately begins attacking my bishop with a4, and I block with a3, and now we have c4. I play king f1, just bring my king back into the game, and king d8 happens. In Lowell's mind, maybe bringing the king up to threaten captures of these pawns and then push them even further. I have c3, just preventing the advancement of the pawn, and king c7. We have king e2, and then king c6. And in this position, I played e4, just trying to get my bishop out. Maybe there will be a time where the rook sacks itself, and then I can play bishop h6 and just control the whole back rank, control this area with my bishop. But we have king c5, bring the king even further into the game. And it doesn't really make sense for me to sack here because after this, my bishop's kind of blocked. Like, my bishop has nowhere to go because this pawn's going to advance. And even after I push this, the king takes, and now I'm going to have a problem right here. So sacking the king in this position, definitely not a great idea. In this case, I went for f4. Maybe I capture a couple pawns, threaten something down there. with the rook promotion, and Lowell does give up on e5, and after I take, we have f6, and I take once again. And I think this is, yeah, this is the position where I make the losing move. Oh wait, sorry. First of all, Lowell plays rook to c8, just sort of maybe the king sacks itself, and then the rook can come down here. And in this position, I made the losing move. I think the best move in this position is just e5, pushing more and maybe threatening some things. But this position, I play bishop d2, and this is losing. If you found the move here is king to b4. After c takes b4, we have rook c5, and after my rook takes, it's all over because of c3, and then this position Lowell played a5, and then d6. And so that was the first game. Lowell wins the first game. Moving on to the second game, I have the black pieces, and Lowell opens, and this is what really surprised me, and this is when I realized, okay, this game I might be a little bit outmatched because I'm very unprepared. Goes for g4. G4 I think is fairly even off the start. I know g4 is not yet solved. It's obviously there are ways to take into strong endgames as black, but it's not necessarily an opening that can just be refuted immediately and with great power. It's not like you're playing something, I don't know. It's not like you're moving d pawn forward or the f pawn forward. However, Towns is very good at that. So I'm not gonna say f4 is terrible. But okay, I go for g6, and after g6 we have an h3. I push the pawn, knight takes, and I go for f5. Knight takes h7. This case probably taking this pawn is stronger, but I captured back. It doesn't matter that much. It matters a little bit, but it's just another variation. This case I gave up the knight, and after rook captures, bishop captures, we have f4 and I capture, and then we have d3, and after captures, I play king f7 just so my pawn doesn't get obstructed. Okay, and so after king to f7, we have king f2, just bringing this king into the game, and I think this is where I play the losing move, and I play queen f8. If you want to try to find a winning sequence, in this case, Lowell started with f6, and I took with the pawn, hoping that I could open my queen up, but Lowell goes for queen h6, and after I capture here, bishop h3, there's only one capture, the queen does not capture anything here, and then after this, there was king g3, and after the capture, I'm sure it was e3, yep, and then after e3, d4, and after d4, b4, and this was basically it. I just captured on b4. After knight c3, I captured it, and rook g1, I resigned the game. So Lowell is up 2-0. We move on to game 3, where in this case I realized, okay, Lowell's probably prepared for this. I'm going to go, because I haven't prepared anything, I'm just going to go completely off my theory, and go for c4. And Lowell responds with g6, and so I push the pawn. I don't know if this is good or bad, but I'm sure it's not terrible, because I don't really know any theory. We have b6 captures and captures, just keeping, maybe the queen has some options here. Yeah, and so I go for b4, not really knowing what to do. Maybe this will open my queen up, and I got options on these squares, while also being able to open up my bishop so nothing can capture here on an intermediate per se. Okay, we have knight h6, and I play g4, and after the knight captures, I go for queen a4. Knight takes on h2, rook takes on h2, and we have bishop h6, and obviously I'm going to capture the bishop. And then we have b5. I have queen takes on b5, just threatening two different ways, and then we have queen c7, going for a queen race. Rook takes h7 and queen c1, and then I play rook takes h8. Queen takes e1, capturing my king, and then I do the same by capturing Lowell's king. We then have queen takes f2, rook takes e7, and queen taking on f1. Following this, I capture here with the rook, and queen takes on e2 now. I recapture with the knight here, and in this position, white is completely winning, but obviously I only have 36 seconds, so whether I find it or not will be interesting. I'm gonna turn off best move arrow in case I ever use that. So we have bishop b7, and I capture with the queen on b7, and then we have a5. I take on b8, a captures here, and then I capture with the rook on d7, and then the queen is going to have, sorry, the rook is going to have to recapture. Oh wait, never mind. That is my bad. The rook comes down and captures on a2. I now have the queen come down and capture here, and after the rook captures on d2, my rook captures back. I only have 14 seconds, so this is definitely a winning position for white, but will I be able to find it? That will be the question. After g5, I think I go back, yeah, and I play queen to f8. Pawn is advanced once again, and I play queen f3, giving up the queen. After the capture here, I move my rook out of the way, and after the capture here, I move this rook up to a4, and at this point I have 12 seconds left. The promotion here comes to knight, and I played knight to a3. After the capture, I gave up my rook, and then after this capture, I played knight c2, and then knight takes on c2 is mate. So moving on to game 4, I'm down 2-1. I have the black pieces again, and Lowell goes for e3, which is a little bit strange, I found, after a g4 game. But I was like, okay. So I respond with b5, and after the bishop takes, I had quite often, I was trying to throw my opponents off in the first couple of games by playing e6. And I'm sure Lowell definitely studied for my e6. But so I went for bishop to a6. And after bishop captures on d7, my knight captures. We have d3, bishop takes, and we have queen takes. At this point in time, I didn't know very much theory. Rook b8 is probably the strongest move. Queen b8 is also pretty strong. But I went for g6. And definitely taking on g6 is the stronger move in this position. But Lowell captures on d7. After my king recaptures, we have c4, just pushing this pawn, maybe making room for this knight, maybe making room for this bishop. To control these squares, and I play c6, just opening up my queen, preparing for options like that. We have knight e2, developing the knight, and queen to b8, threatening this piece and this piece both at the same time. We have knight b to c3, and I capture down here on h2. Capturing this doesn't really do anything, I don't think, but I could be wrong. But I just thought taking on h2 in this case was the better position. I could go back for a second and look. Queen captures on h2 is significantly stronger for black. After capturing on b2, we have the recommended move is bishop captures, and in this case, there's no real good moves for black. The best recommended move is knight to f6, because if e4 is played, then we just have bishop a3, and the bishop's going to come down here and capture. So even threatening this knight other way is not going to do anything. So that pin's not that strong. Anyways, I did take on h2. Rook retakes on h2, and I played bishop to g7. Rook takes. I'm going to turn off the evaluation so that it doesn't slow anything down. I have bishop takes on c3, and then the knight recaptures on c3, replacing this knight, and I recapture here with the rook. We now have c5, and then I respond with g5, just pushing this pawn. We have king d2 and e5, now pressuring this knight. We now have f4, and just getting rid of both these pawns, so captures, 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 and oh, not g4, although it works the same, g3, and I take on g3. We now have knight to d5. I have c takes on d5, and then c6, and my king has to recapture. We now have b4, and then g2. King d1, right here, and I give up the knight and recapture with the rook, and we then have king to c2. After king c2, I just promote to queen, getting rid of this. I only have 6 seconds left in this position, so at this point I'm just sort of giving away pieces because I don't know what else to do. Rook to h1, the rook captures, and then I play rook to h8, sort of giving away my rooks, giving away my advantage, but now I have up to 10 seconds, I give away the pawn, and then after that I play d4, and I'm back to 20 seconds. However, Lowell has a minute and the rook, and so it should be interesting. We now have a6, and I go for f5, just pushing my pawns, a7, and king to d5. We now have king b2, and I play d3, just advancing the pawns even more. We have a8 equals rook, rook promotion down here. I play f4, continuing to advance the pawns. We have rook a b8, and then we have d2. After a4, I respond with f3, continuing to push my pawns all the way, and then we have a5. I then push this pawn again, f2, and a6, going to promote this likely to a rook. I go f1 equals king, and after a7, I promote to another king. So now I have two kings in the game. We now have king a3, just getting this king out of the way, and we have king f to e2. That's something you may never see in many chess games is seeing a specified king move. We now have king to a4, bringing the king up the board, trying to connect it with the other pieces, and king to e6, king e6, right here. And in this position, Lowell made the losing move. I think the only two moves in this case are rook to h4 and rook to b4. Problem is if you promote something down here, I can move my king here, and one of these rooks is going to have to sacrifice down here with the other rook recapturing, and then the kings are easy to sacrifice. But Lowell goes for rook h6, and I'm sure several things win now. I played king to c1, and then after the capture, king to c2, and then capture, and then king to d2, mate. Moving on to game 5, I have the white pieces again. I go for e3. Lowell does not go for e6, but b5 this time, and after I capture, also goes for the Bosnian like I did the previous game. Bishop takes on d7, knight takes on d7, I play c4, and after the bishop captures, we have queen to g4, and bishop captures here. Probably the better move would have been queen there to capture this pawn, but this is what I chose to do in the game because I hadn't studied very much. And now I would probably play this, or I would go for d3 on the previous move. Anyways, my queen takes on g7, bishop takes, rook takes, and after the bishop takes here, my rook recaptures, and then Lowell gives up the queen and recaptures with the knight. Obviously, you can't recapture with the rook because of this. I then push h4, just putting pressure on this knight up here, and we have e6. We now have knight e2, I develop my knight, and Lowell does the same with knight e7. We now have bishop a3, threatening this knight, trying to get rid of the knight. But we have c5, and after that take a5, pushing this pawn forward, maybe threaten my knight. And after these series of captures, I have knight b to c3, just getting this knight out. Maybe I'll sack it, maybe I'm putting pressure here. And after e5, I go for f4. And after the capture, I recapture this pawn. Now this pawn can move up and pressure. Oh wait, I did not take. I took with the knight. Hopefully, maybe I'm putting pressure on the king right here, or however. And we have knight to a6. In this case, I made the losing move of king to f2. I wasn't really paying attention, but after the knight blocks this pawn is now free to push, and the rook is not defending it. So we have a4, and then after this capture, we give up. Lowell gives up the knight. After this, rook to a1, giving up this rook, and then moving this rook down here. After the capture, Lowell gives up the king. And then after f6, the rook captures, and h5, the knight captures as mate. Lowell is now up 3-2. We now are moving on to game 6 in a game to 5.5, and Lowell opens with, I'm going to flip the board, Lowell opens with g3 in this game, and I respond with g6, and after b3 I go c5, just threatening to force captures. However, Lowell goes for b4 and then knight to h3, just developing this knight here, hopefully causing problems for me, and I go for g5. After the capture, I go to h6, creating sort of a weakness here. However, I can also develop my king after this. We have g4, and I respond with b3, and c captures on b3. I then go for h5, and after the capture, and bishop h3, I am now presenting two threats right there, and Lowell goes for e4, just jumping and grabbing space in the middle, opening up for the queen, and I capture on h2, and after the rook recaptures, I play king g7, just because I wanna make sure my king can capture here, but Lowell makes sure my king gets way out of the play, and I have to capture in the corner. We now have e5 coming up to cause some pressure, and I play queen a5, getting my queen right out of the way, and e6, and I capture down here. The rook recaptures, so that so now I have double stacked pawns right here. This is a very weak square, my king's in the corner, and my position's very ugly. The rook captures on a7, I have to recapture, and Lowell gives up the bishop and recaptures with the knight. I play king g7 to get my king back in the game, and we now have queen to g4, threatening both the king and this pawn. But I play king f6, and oh wait, king f6, king f6. I play king f6, and then after this capture, I recapture with the king, so no problems are created. We now have knight c2, and after knight c2, I play b5, just threatening the knight, and Lowell stops that with b4. I play king d6, maybe threatening to sack, and then give this up. And Lowell plays f4. I play king to d7, just protecting this now because I don't want my bishop to become a problem. And we have knight to e3. Just centralizing the knight, taking up more space. And I play bishop to a6, realizing that this is not going to be a threat. Lowell is going to be left with one pawn. But we have d3, just lining this pawn up right here. And I bring my bishop back to c8 for lack of a better move, and with only 10 seconds left on my clock. Lowell has 12 seconds. We have f5, and I play e6. So then after f takes, I can capture this pawn right here, and then e takes d7, and I capture on e1. Promotion down here ends up being king, and I play knight to e7, and after this capture, I play knight c8, and there's a capture here, and I immediately push my pawn. We then have pushing of pawn by Lowell, and this continues for quite a bit until I play bishop to h4, threatening to give up the bishop or take the king. We then have d7. I give up the bishop. Yeah, I give up. That is me. Yeah, I think that's me. Lowell captures it, and in this case, I had a winning move. You can try to find it when you pause the video, but I ended up missing the winning move. I promoted to bishop. Rook is actually the winning move because after you give up the knight, the king cannot get out of the way to unprotect this pawn. So promoting to rook would have actually been a winning move, but I promoted to bishop. Too bad. And then after knight c2, bishop takes. We have king c7, bishop to g6. And then after the promotion to bishop, I played bishop to e8, and then after Lowell gives up the king, this game is a draw. So Lowell is now up 3.5 to 2.5, and in this case, I have the white piece again. I open with e3, and Lowell responds with the modern defense again. I go for the exact same line. Probably should have played something else, realizing that I had lost in the first game and not in a good way and didn't really have a good position. But I go for the same thing, the stockfish defense again. After capture. We have c5 again, bring the knight back, all the same moves. a5, h4, queen takes, rook takes, bishop to b7, and after captures, we still have the same moves. The king does not recapture first. The rook captures, and then the rook recaptures. I take the bishop and then capture the rook after capturing my knight. A lot of captures. We now have a4, and I block with... Oh, I do not block with a3 this time. I block with oh wait, I play bishop to d2, just bringing my bishop out here. But we have c4, and then I block it with c3. We now have king to d8, bringing the king into the game, and I play e4, just opening up for my bishop, and we have d5. I capture, and after the recapture, the threat here is obviously this, and then maybe giving up this pawn. Maybe if the rook is out of the way, like the king moves, the rook comes out of the way, then a5 is going to be really strong. But I go for bishop h6, just bring my bishop down here. It is safe now. And we have a5. Maybe making some room for the rook. King g2, just trying to get my king into the game, and rook to c8. We now have f4 and f5 stopping the advance of my pawn right here. King f3, bring my king further into game, and rook to c5, maybe presenting a double capture sometime in the future. And in this case, I play king g4. I went down to 13 seconds, which means I was actually really down at 8 seconds, and I could not find a better move. So f takes g4, and now I don't have a king left. and I just push the pawn f5, and we have g3. I then push a3 with lack of a better move. I'm down to 5 seconds, and the wall almost has 2 minutes. King d7, just putting the king into the game. There's no hurry. I play rook h1, king d6, just continuing to bring the king closer to all the action. Rook a1, just trying to get time back. I'm still at 5 seconds, which means I was really down at 0.4 and I barely made a move. We have g2, and I give up the rook, and king is promoted to. This case I played f6, but now it's all over. After giving up the king, Lowell gives up this pawn, and as we had thought before, the double capture will win the game. After king e1, I have to capture here, and the king to d2, and the game is all over. Lowell is up 4.5 to 2.5 going into the 8th game, so one win for Lowell will win the game because it's first to 5.5. And in this case, I'm playing the black pieces again, and Lowell opens with e3. And in this case, I'm down, so I just go what I'm comfortable with, and that's e6. And after the bishop takes, bishop recaptures. We have knight a3 going for the double pawn attack. I take, and after the recapture, I play bishop to c8, retreating. We now have knight e2, which is traditionally not a line played, but I guess this is what Lowell had prepared for me. After king takes, bishop takes on d2, and I play knight a6, which is the strongest move. Two pieces control this square, which is the only square my knight can be captured on. This doesn't work, and this doesn't work, so my knight is safe here. And we have knight to c3. And in this case, I gave up the knight first, and after a takes, the best move here is probably this. Even if the queen sacks, everything, this square is double guarded by the knight and king, this square is double guarded by the king and rook, so pushing e5 is going to be safe. However, I played king d7, which is the strongest move, so for the last time, pause the video if you would like to, and find the winning move for Lowell. And Lowell does find this. It starts with knight d5, and after giving that up, e4. After giving that up, gives up the bishop, and after g takes h6, the queen. This is the move that Lowell was looking for. Is the queen takes on d7, and after bishop takes on d7, it's all over. The first move that is played is b5. There's several wins from here. After b5, we have c4. After the capture here, we have rook to d1, and I capture on a2. Rook to d8, and my rook captures, and after king to d2, I resign the game. I did not, oh wait, yeah, I did not capture. I resigned the game. Anyways, it was great games with Lowell, a very, very strong player, and this gave me my first loss of the tournament and my first loss of the Swiss round. And so yeah, I hope you all enjoyed watching this video, continuing the coverage of my Anti-Chess World Championship match. This was sort of a game where I was like, oh wow, I've really got to be on my toes, and I've really got to make sure I study for everyone, regardless of if I know what they're playing or not. And yeah, other than that, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please stay tuned for content in the future, and I really hope you enjoy these videos and share with your friends and other people who are in the anti-chess community. Thanks so much, and have a great day. See ya.